Hello and welcome to today's lesson. So we're going to be starting a new chapter today, and today we're going to focus on what relations are, what functions are, how do we test a graph to see if it is a function, and then how we're going to find the domain and range of functions. So one of the things that we're going to look at in terms of our relations and what relations are, relations basically are anytime you talk about two things and how they're related, it is a relation. Okay, so anytime we're relating two different topics, it's a relation. Now, those relations can actually be shown in different ways, and we're going to see that today. The first one is we could do it in a table. Okay, so like a T-table, and you've seen those done before. One could be a table. The other is what we call mapping notation. The next, of course, is a graph. And our final one is an equation. So those are the four ways we're going to be looking at relations. So when we look at those relations, we have, and if you think about it up here in your T-table maybe, when we look about it, or even at your graph, we have X values, okay, and those are called the domain, okay, and the Y values are going to be called the range. Now, there's other words also that relate to domain, okay. If we talk about the independent variable, that would also be the domain. Another one you've probably heard is the input, okay? So we've got the X variable, we've got the domain, we've got the independent variable, and the input. The next that we look at is our range, and the same way, our range, if our domain is our independent, our range is our dependent. And you've heard those words probably from science class, your dependent variable. Okay, and it's also the output. So we're going to refer to the domain and range several different ways. So be sure you remember those. The other thing when we talk about a relation, if it has distinct points, then we call the graph being discrete. Okay, and what discrete means is that we can count. They're countable. So I can specifically count how many points are on the graph. Okay, a relation with connected lines or curved is called a continuous graph. Okay, now do not confuse, and this happens a lot, that the arrow on the end means continuous in this case. That is not true. Okay, that is not what we're talking about. So again, a discrete graph, I can count the specific points. We're continuous, the dots are actually connected, okay? There does not have to be those arrows on the end. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So a relationship in which each element of the domain is paired with exactly one element of the range, that's what a function is, okay? So a function is when we say every X has one Y, okay? Every X just has one Y attached to it. And so an example of a set of points, okay, might be something like 0, 1, -5, 2, 6, -2, 5, 7. So when I look at that set of points, each X only goes to one Y. So an example that would not be, would be 0, 1, 0, 3, -5, 2, 6, 2, 5, 7. So when I look at this, what I see here is that 0 goes to 1 and 0 goes to 3. Therefore, that is not a function. And I ask you that a lot of times if I'm having you to tell whether it is a function or not. you have to say why it's not. And that case would be that 0 goes to 2 different numbers, okay? So that's if we're given a table. If we're given a graph, okay, if we're given a graph, so an example might be if I have a line. If I can take and I can draw a vertical line, remember what vertical is, and I only hit in one point, okay, then it is a function. So in order for it to be a function, a vertical line cannot pass for more than one point, okay? So an example of not a function might be if I have a circle, and when I draw a line through the circle, I hit in 2 points. Therefore, that is not a function, okay? Another example that we're going to see in here, of course, would be we do the absolute value. We've been talking about absolute value, where we're going to graph an absolute value. And so if you have that graph, if I take and I draw a vertical line anywhere, okay, I'm only hitting in one spot each time. Okay, so those are examples of functions and not functions.